and answer the things that Dawkins even said by other scientists.
The case for chemical evolution only weakens when we consider that long chains of specific amino acids, all in exactly the right position, are required to form the proteins of life. Even worse, amino acids do not naturally link up to form proteins, but rather tend to break down.
Now, proteins can be 2,000 or 3,000 amino acids long, very long, complex chemicals, and they're very much like a computer program. Every amino acid has to be in exactly the right position. If one of them is wrong, then the whole protein is useless, just like a computer program.
The improbabilities buried in Darwinism start right at the very beginning. Even before life began, how did the first protein molecule come about? And there's been quite a bit of work done on this to investigate the probability of it, work both by information theory technologists and also by molecular biologists actually tinkering with proteins to see whether or not they can be taken to pieces and reassembled. And the work of both groups has found that the probability of a protein of the sort of size that you find in the human body coming about by chance is so great as to be virtually impossible. It's something which is, yes, it is possible if you have eternity at your disposal, but Darwinists just don't have eternity at their disposal.
Information theory scientist Hubert Yockey calculated, and MIT biologist Robert Sauer confirmed, that the probability that a protein containing just 100 amino acids would form spontaneously is less than 1 chance in 10 to the 65th power. An event so improbable that it could be compared to winning the state lottery by finding the winning ticket in the street, and then continuing to find the winning ticket in the street every week for 1,000 years.
The origin of the very first animal life out of ordinary complex chemicals is so large that no evolutionist has ever been able to overcome it, and it is one of the biggest barriers to the theory of evolution that I know.
Even if proteins miraculously formed, we still are not close to producing life. The simplest living cells require thousands of specialized proteins in order to function.
A number of scientists have tried to calculate the probability of life arising by chance. Sir Fred Hoyle, a British mathematician, using the supercomputer and the assistance of graduate students, estimated only the origin of the proteins of an amoeba, 2,000 of them, arising by chance. He estimated that the probability that the proteins of an amoeba could arise by chance is 1 chance in 10 to the 40,000th power.
A probability of 1 chance in 10 to the 40,000th power is absurdly small. To illustrate this, consider the probability of snatching a particular atom out of the entire universe is 1 chance in 10 to the 80th power. After making this calculation, British mathematician Sir Frederick Hoyle stated, "The likelihood of the formation of life from inanimate matter is 1 to a number with 40,000 noughts after it. It is enough to bury Darwin and the whole theory of evolution. There was no primeval soup, neither on this planet nor any other. And if the beginnings of life were not random, they must therefore have been the product of purposeful intelligence."
I'm going to stop the video there because it goes on there a couple minutes. It's absurd. It doesn't make any sense. Remember, the snatching 1 atom out of the universe is 10 to the 80th power. 48 of Jesus' prophecies be fulfilled in 1 man, 10 to the 157th power. Creating just the proteins available, not the whole cell, which they go after this and get into the cell structure. It's mind-boggling into DNA and everything. Just the proteins of an amoeba, 2,000 of them, 1 to the 40,000th power. It buries Darwin. Sir Fred Hoyle says, in contradiction to Dawkins, not just primeval soup here or anywhere else, evolution doesn't happen. It's impossible. It's a fairy tale. It's a fairy tale for grown-ups, we'll see one scientist even call it here. Fred Hoyle is not a Christian. He's a physicist who believed in evolution. But after looking at the stats, I can't believe it. It's got to be intelligently designed because it doesn't make sense. There's no logic behind it. There never will be. Folks, we need to understand the Bible is true. Let every man else be a liar Don't worry about the proof they think they have. They don't have any. But no show would be fit if we didn't talk about the dinosaurs. Everybody likes the dinosaurs. In fact, they're one of the biggest hooks that evolutionists use to drag in our kids, and bring them into an evolution. They started with little kids and the dinosaurs. 65 million years ago, you know, that's how long ago we had the dinosaurs. We didn't even have the term dinosaur until Sir Richard Owen made it up in 1841. Before that, we all know them as dragons. And there's a lot of evidence that shows out there, and we'll see a little bit of it here, that there may very well even be dinosaurs alive today. I'm not saying there are, but they definitely were here in the last 6,000 years, and they could very well be alive today in certain jungles. And there is evidence for that out there. We have assumptions for creationists, assumptions A, and we have assumptions B for your evolutionists. And then we have the rocks and the fossils. Those are the facts. We've all got the same stuff, guys, just like I said before. The evidence is the same. We don't have different evidence. We all look at the same earth. The evolutionists don't have more than the creationists do. We all look at the same thing. It's our interpretation based on our previous assumptions of those items why we come to different conclusions. It doesn't have to do with facts. Just like the little thing sign says, the guy doesn't dig it up, there's not a tag on the bones. Oh, 65 million years old. Look at that, you know, they labeled it for us. We don't have that type of evidence. It isn't supported. Here's one scientist, Dr. Ralph Molnar, a paleontologist for Queensland Museum. One of the things that we have is part of the hip bone or pelvis. Now, this specimen actually looks like it had come from an animal that looked like it died 200 or 300 years ago, all dry and chalky, this sort of thing. It doesn't actually mean it died 200 or 300 years ago. In Montana, I've seen dinosaur bones that look like that. They've come from animals that died 200 or 300 years ago. And I know very well that they died much longer than that. It gives a suggestion that Megalania may have been alive fairly recently. It gives that suggestion that this dinosaur might have been alive real recently, but that couldn't be true because we know they died off 65 million years ago. But yet they say that that's why, and yet listen to what another scientist, evolutionary scientist, says about fossilization. Fossilization is a process that can take anything from a few hours to millions of years. The amount of time that it takes for a bone to become completely mineralized is highly variable. If the groundwater is heavily laden with minerals in solution, the process can happen rapidly. Modern bones that fall into mineral springs can become permineralized within a matter of weeks. So they even admit, well, we can fossilize things real quick, depending on the right sediments and the right actions take place. You know, maybe like a worldwide flood that Noah tells us about. You know, maybe that could have done it. They say that it can happen that way, and the evidence points to that's the way it did happen. By striate fossils, by the death poses of these dinosaurs and things dying, by egg placement, by laying eggs literally while the flood was coming. We can make all kinds of extrapolations, and it makes sense, our ideas. Here's one that blows them away. Right there, if you look up there on the left, you'll see that that's a picture of a dinosaur bone, and what they're basically saying through the whole thing is that's a red blood cell they found in a dinosaur bone. You don't find red blood cells in anything that's millions of years old. Red blood cells disappear. They wipe out. They disintegrate. So maybe they can do Jurassic Park. Maybe they can make a dinosaur alive and chase all over the place because they found red blood cells in dinosaur bones. So that thing couldn't have been dead too terribly long. Dinosaurs are not proved to be millions of years old. They could very well be out there. They've definitely been here in the last few thousand years. One of the biggest frauds foisted on our children, foisted on us, was by Dr. Ernst Haeckel back in 1866. He printed a book with these pictures he drew that supposedly showed that it's a theory called recapitulation that shows that with every species on the planet, we all have the same beginnings, and therefore it shows evolution in the womb, per se. He's got drawings of the fish, the salamander, the turtle, the chicken, rabbit, and human. You look, they all look very similar. And as they progress, they finally turn into what we are. And he says, look, evolution's seen in the womb. Now, this was refuted by his senior professor, Dr. Wilhelm, as early as 1874 when he printed his second book and put it out there for people to look at. Stephen Jay Gould, who many of you may know, the guy who started the theory, who made really popular the theory of punctuated equilibrium because you can't find any proof of long-age fossil findings. So he said they must have evolved like that really quick over a generation or two. That's why we don't have fossils, because, hey, it doesn't make sense, Darwinian evolution. But he said both the theory of recapitulation and the latter approach to classification that it encouraged are or should be defunct today. Now the bottom row are actual embryonic photographs showcased in Dr. Michael K. Richardson's book, Anatomy and Embryology, 1997. Do those look anything like the pictures up there? Those look anything like? Do we follow a similar evolutionary path? No. It's been disproven. It was questioned and disproven back in 1874. 1997, they've even got photos of it. So you'd think for sure they wouldn't be talking about this in science books. Here's a 1998 science book. There they are saying, oh, look, we all evolved. There's proof of evolution. This is after 100 years, 120 years since this has been refuted. And we even got pictures of it the year before this was printed. And they're still printing these books.